Hello friends, MBA conference today. Who really look presidential? Today's Nigerian Bar Association, conference in Port Harcourt gave Nigerians something extremely valuable ahead of 2027. An opportunity to see several presidential contenders and senior political figures in the same room answering questions without the protocol, or the protection of campaign rally. This was not a village rally. This was not a party convention. This was not a crowd of supporters chanting a candidate name. The audience was made up largely of lawyers, professionals, and people accustomed to questioning claims, interpreting the laws, and testing arguments. And that makes today's performance particularly important. The political session theme Beyond Limits focused on Nigerians' political future, governance, the records of politicians who have previously held public office, and the consequences of policies such as fuel subsidy removal and transportation policy. So if we may temporarily remove party loyalty, ethnicity, religion, and personal affection from the equation, who actually look ready to govern Nigeria? My answer is nuanced. Peter Obi, the most presidential overall in that invitee. If the question is who look more like someone trying to occupy the presidency rather than simply win an election or win an argument, for me, Peter Obi was the strongest overall. And I'm going to give you guys my opinions and observations. And I say that while acknowledging that Obi was not flawless. One of the most interesting moments came when Obi questioned the criteria by which Nigeria choose presidents and governors, asking what the actual qualifications for the office are. His strength today was largely composure, structure, and the attempt to elevate the discussions beyond personality politics. Obi's political communication is strongest when he talks about productivity, public sector efficiency, investment, human capital, education, all right, healthcare, and if I may remember, fiscal responsibility. Okay, and also measuring government by outcomes. That style generally plays well before a professional audience. What Obi did well. Okay, what did Obi did well? One, he maintained presidential composure. He did not need to dominate the room by shouting. That in politics matters, especially when seeking the office of the presidency. A president will routinely sit across from the hostile governors, opposition leaders, foreign presidents, military commanders, labor unions, business leaders, and journalists. Presidential temperament is therefore very important, and Obi exhibited that today. Secondly, he generally kept the conversation around governance. Okay? Rather than allowing the session to become entirely about personalities, Obi repeatedly tried to bring the discussion back to what government should achieve. And thirdly, he looked like someone who understood the importance of institutional performance. Should I repeat that? I said, thirdly, he looked like someone who understood the importance of institutional performance. That is consistent with the image he has been developing, government as an institution that should produce measurable results. But I have a concern. Obi has a serious weakness, and I have said it in several of my videos. Obi has a serious weakness. Today's exchange also exposed something Obi must fix. He cannot allow opponents to define his gubernatorial record for him. When he was a governor, he cannot allow opponents to define his gubernatorial record for him. Amaechi attacked Obi Anambra record, specifically claiming that education and public services suffered and that lecturers and doctors went on a strike for 13 months. Whether every element of that criticism is fairly characterized is another question. But politically, the lesson is obvious. Obi needs to come armed with the evidence. You must come armed with the evidence. If somebody says you fail as a governor, the answer should not simply be, I performed. The answer should not simply be, I performed. No, no, no. It should be, here is where Anambra was when I entered office. Here is where it was when I left. Here are the independent indicators. Here are the schools. Here are the roads. Here are the hospitals. Here are the finances. Here are the projects. Obi need a governor to president scorecard. He needs a governor to president scorecard. You must be armed at all times. Do not allow somebody to define your gubernatorial when you are Anambra governor. His supporters know his story already. His supporters knows his story already. The undecided Nigerian voters does not. Let's come to Omoyele Sowore, the most fearless and memorable. If Obi was the most presidential overall, so Sowore may have been the most memorable person on the stage. And why did I say so? Why? Because he did something many politicians are afraid to do. He directly confronted people who had previously exercised power. Sowore attacked the records of Obi and Amaechi and challenged politicians who had governed Nigeria to account for their performance. His argument about subsidy was particularly forceful. He said he had consistently opposed subsidy removal and argued that Nigerians have repeatedly been promised that subsidy removed would make the country better. Yet, decades later, citizens were still being asked to accept the same argument. That consistency is politically valuable. Let's look at Sowore's strength. Let's look at Sowore's strength. One, courage. He doesn't, appear intimidated by political status. That is attractive to voters who believe Nigerian political establishment has become too comfortable. Secondly, consistency. We are looking at Sowore's strength. His subsidy argument is one area where he can claim a relatively clear historical positions. Thirdly, directness. He does not hide behind diplomatic language. He tells politicians, show us your record. That is a powerful opposition message. That is a powerful opposition message. And fourthly, he represents the outsider. And that gives him something Obi, Amaechi, and many other experienced politicians cannot simply completely reproduce. All right? Sowore can say, I wasn't the one running the system. He can say that. That is politically powerful. That is politically powerful. But Sowore's biggest weakness was also on display. What are the weaknesses of Sowore? Sowore's biggest weaknesses was also on display. He can become too controversial, confrontational. He can become too confrontational. The exchange with Amaechi became heated. Amaechi eventually told him, when politicians are talking, close your mouth. That moment became one of the most widely reported incidents from the conference. Sowore supporters may see that as courage. Okay? They may see that as courage. but an undecided voter may see something else. Can this man control his anger or himself under pressure? There's a difference between being fearless and being presidential. There's a big difference between fearless and being presidential. Sowore needs to preserve his courage while improving his discipline, diplomacy, and emotional control. The president of Nigeria cannot treat every disagreement as a straight confrontation. He needs to be able to say, all right, I strongly disagree with you, and here is why. That is more decent. Without allowing the argument to become personal. Okay? That can give room, not allowing the argument to become personal. And here is my verdict on Sowore. Excellent opposition voice, excellent challenger, very strong on exposing political contradictions, but he needs to demonstrate more frequently that he can move from protest to administration. Okay? He needs to demonstrate more frequently that he can move from protest to administration. Nigeria does not only need someone who can identify the problem, it needs someone who can run the machinery that solves it. Now let's come to Rotimi Amaechi, the experience card. I tag it as the experience card. Amaechi was interesting because he entered the discussion with something Sowore cannot claim. Extensive experience inside government. He was a governor of Rivers State and later Minister of Transportation. Okay? And he used that experience aggressively. I don't know if you guys are following my narrations on today's conference, try to distinguish between those guests. He used that experience aggressively. When Sowore challenged the records of former office holders, Amaechi, essentially responded, I have been there, I have bulletins, look at the record. He defended the infrastructure delivered during his tenure and specifically mentioned rail project, arguing that the Lagos, Ibadan, and Abuja Kaduna rail systems were operational during his time as a minister. That was a legitimate political defense. That was a legitimate political defense. Now let's look at Amaechi's strength. One, experience. Yes, give it to him, experience. He understands how government works. Secondly, infrastructure knowledge. Okay, his transportation portfolio gives him a substantive area of expertise. And thirdly, confidence. He did not look intimidated. And fourthly, ability to respond immediately. When attacked, he immediately produced counter-argument from his record, and that is what Obi need to do. You have to come armed. Don't allow opponent to define your records. When Amaechi was attacked, he immediately produced counter-argument from his records. That is an important political skills. But also, Amaechi made a significant mistakes also in that stage. Okay? And for me, the phrase, Sowore, close your mouth, that was unnecessary. It may have won the exchange emotionally, but it did not help his presidential, presidential image. A senior statesman should be able to defeat an argument without appearing irritated by the person making it. Imagine the same situation in the presidential palace. Imagine an opposition leader challenging the vice president. Okay? The country needs someone who can respond. Okay? I respect your right to disagree, but you are wrong on the facts. And here is the evidence. Control, measure, matters a lot when you are sitting in that office as a vice president. That sounds presidential. Okay? Close your mouth sounds political. There, when he says close your mouth, that sounds political. There is another issue. Amaechi defense sometimes sounds like, abute this. I'm using that phrase, abute this. All right? But Nigeria increasingly wants, what did it achieve? What did it achieve? A road is not successful simply because it was constructed. A railway is not successful merely because a train once ran on it. Okay? I don't know if I'm making any sense to what my arguments are. The real questions are, how many passengers? Okay? How much revenue? Okay? What economic activity? All right? What maintenance costs? All right? What measurable benefit? Can I remember more? Is it still functioning? That is the level at which political accountability must now operate. Now, let me give you guys my verdict on Amaechi. This is my own verdict on Amaechi. Strong governing experience, strong infrastructure knowledge. Okay, he has a strong infrastructure knowledge, good political instincts, but he needs greater composure and should avoid allowing opponents to drag him into personal exchange. Now, let's look at Adewale Adebayo. I tag him as the policy intellectual. He has that policy intellectual. Adewale Adebayo was another interesting presence. His biggest strength is that he tends to approach Nigerian politics from a policy and institutional perspective rather than pure personality politics. And that is excellent. Interestingly, even the reporting of the section highlights that Amaechi distinguished between those who had previously governed and people such as Sowore and Adebayo, who had not held comparable executive government positions. Okay? That creates an interesting advantage for Adebayo. He cannot be blamed for the failures of previous administrations in the same way former governor and ministers can. All right? But it also creates a challenge. Let's look at his weakness in that stage. Okay, let's look at his weakness in that stage. How does he convert intellectual competence into mass political appeal? Nigerian presidency requires more than knowing what is wrong. It requires what? Coalition building. Able to coalesce with others. Electoral organization. Grassroots mobilization. All right, and communication and political negotiations, security management, and international diplomacy. Okay, if I'm not forgetting one, economic management also is very important. Adebayo needs to show Nigerians not merely that he understands Nigerian problem, but that he can build a government capable of what? Solving them. Now let's talk about the Duke, the PRP candidate. The PRP Duke presidential candidate was also present according to what I see on the net. But according to what I see on the net and from other researches, I missed his questions, but I was able to go online and search what he said. But I will be cautious about ranking him strongly against Obi, Sowore, and Amaechi based on the material I was able to gather on the net. I can independently verify from today's sessions on the little I have. There is simply less detailed reporting available on his answers. I couldn't get much on his answers, and there is no other major exchanges involving Obi Sowore and Amaechi with him that I could relay my hands upon. And that itself is a political lesson that I should be able to recite properly on Duke to be able to give you guys on my own opinion. So in modern presidential politics, being present is not enough. So please pardon me for not giving you guys much more on Duke. A candidate must produce memorable arguments that survive beyond the room. If voters leave a conference remembering Obi's governance arguments, Sowore's confrontation, Amaechi's defense of his record, but cannot remember what another candidate stood for, that candidate has a communication problem. So let's talk about who won the MBA political session. Who won it? Okay, this depends on what I mean, or what I read, or what I see, or what I was able to gather from everybody that is present. I could rephrase it as who generated the most controversy. Could be, you tell me that Sowore generated the most controversy. Who was the most confrontational? Sowore. Who defended previous government experience most aggressively is Amaechi. Okay. Who demonstrated the strongest outsider anti-establishment posture? We all know the answer is Sowore. Okay. Now, who appeared most presidential in temperament? We all know the answer is Peter Obi. All right. Now, who has the strongest need to prove his record with hard evidence? Peter Obi and Amaechi. They have the strongest need to prove his record with hard evidence. It's Peter Obi and Amaechi. Now, who need to demonstrate more clearly that he can move from criticism to governing is Sowore. And who needs to convert intellectual policy credibility into mass political communications is Adebayo. Okay? Now, on this particular section, all right, I will base it on being non-partisan. As I'm an independent, I don't belong to any party, so my arguments are always for and against. I like to be neutral and be, clear. So on this particular session, I'm going to be non-partisan. So my judgmental is going to be non-partisan. Okay, even though I'm going to, if I'm around, I'm going to vote for PWB. I still don't belong to any political party, but I'm going to base my narrative and judgment here being on non-partisan. So my non-partisan presidential scorecard, if I were sitting presently in that MBO audience, if I were there live and watch everything and evaluating purely as potential national leaders, this is my scorecard. Okay, based on candidate, figure substance, composure experience, challenge to status quo presidential pressure, I will give I will rate Obi first, Amaechi second, and Sowore third. Duke has a question mark because I was not able to gather much information to his presence in that MBA conference. So that is why I'm putting him aside. I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be negative or positive on his side. I'm going to be neutral on that assessment. But there is an even bigger winner today, and it is the bigger winner today in that conference. It's not even Obi. It's not even Sowore. It's not even Amaechi. It's not even Adebayo. Who are the bigger winner in today's conference? It was the Nigerian voters. Why? Because this is what democracy should look like. Candidates sitting in front of an educational audience, being challenged, being interrupted, defending their records, explaining policies, being questioned about subsidy, being questioned about infrastructure, okay? Being questioned about their experience, okay? And being forced to confront their past. That is infinitely better than politicians standing on a stage shouting. Okay? They'll be in a stage shouting, vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. The most important lesson for Peter Obi, today's conference, okay? Obi should leave today's conference with one assessment. Build the case before the opposition build it for you. Okay? These are the most important lessons for Peter Obi is Obi should leave today's conference with one assessment. Build your case before the opposition build it for you. He needs to publish a comprehensive Anambra record versus Nigerian promise. Document, not propaganda, not campaign slogans, hard numbers. Before and after. Okay? Education, all right? Healthcare, all right? And what again? There are about two or three of these, roads projects. Okay? Security. If I'm not forgetting, there's one again, debt and um, debt and capital projects, revenue, okay, industrial development, okay, human development, okay, and I think that's all. Okay, then he should say, okay, judge me by my record. Okay, because today's attack from Amaechi and Sowore, okay, demonstrates something important. Demonstrates something important. The 2027 election will not only be Tinubu's versus Obi, okay? Apart from that, it will be increasingly become what? What did you do when you had power? What did you do when you had power? That question will be asked of anybody, everybody. And every candidate who has ever held office must be ready to what? Give an answer. There's no dodging. Now, let's look at the most important lesson for Sowore. What is the most important lesson for Sowore? Sowore has something extremely valuable. Courage. Okay? He should not lose it. That courage, he should not lose it. But he needs to add something to that courage. Presidential temperament. Presidential temperament. He needs to be able to destroy an argument without destroying the room. Okay? His strongest political weapon is not shouting. I repeat, his strongest political weapon is not shouting. It is his ability to say, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. He should use that weapon more often. Now, let's look at the most important lesson for Amaechi. Amaechi needs to understand that experience is not immunity from accountability. Okay? Amaechi needs to understand that experience is not immunity from accountability. His experience is an asset, but it's also a record that voters can interrogate. Okay? Voters can interrogate that experience, that record. Instead of saying, I was there, he should say something memorable. He should say, I was there, here is what I achieved, here is what I failed to achieve, here is what I learned, here is what I would do differently. Okay, that will make him much more credible. And the strongest politician is not the one who claims never to have made mistakes. That is not the strongest politician. Any strongest politician who that says, I have never made a mistake, then that person is a deceiver. It is not the one who can, it is the one who can acknowledge them and explain what he learned. All right, now let's go to my final verdict. Let's go to my final verdict. Today's MBA conference was probably one of the more useful political texts we have ever seen so far on the road to 2027. And my overall impression is this: Peter Obi looked the most presidential. Sowore looked the most fearless. Amaechi looked like the most experienced. Adebe looked the most policy intellectual driven, but none of them is complete. Obi needs more aggressive defense of his record and more detailed implementations plan. Sowore need more presidential restraint and a stronger demonstration of executive competence. All right. Now, Amaechi need more composure and less defensiveness. Adebayo need greater political visibility and a clearer mass market governing propositions. And all of them need to understand something. All of them need to understand something. Nigeria no longer need another politician who can simply tell Nigerians what is wrong. Nigeria needs someone who can answer 5 brutal, simple questions. 5 brutally simple questions. What exactly will you do? How much will it cost? Where will the money come from? Okay? When will Nigerians see the results? That is critical. And what happens if you fail? That is the standard by which I believe Nigerians should judge every candidate in 2027. Not tribe, not religion. Okay? Not tribe, not religion, not party. Okay? Not social media popularity. Not result, not insults. Okay? Not promises. Okay? Not promises. Record, capacity, character, plan, results, and if the NBA conference is preview of what is coming, then the 2027 campaign is finally beginning to move from campaign slogan to candidates. Okay? Move from campaign slogan to candidate accountability. That is exactly where Nigerian democracy needs to go. Now, let me go to my overall conclusion on this. Let me go to my overall conclusions so that I can end this video. But thank you for staying with me and watching and going through the journey with me. What is my overall conclusion? Peter Obi came across as the strongest presidential style candidate overall, but Sowore arguably produced the most memorable and combative performance. Amaechi demonstrated the strongest experience in government defense, but his emotional exchange with Sowore hurt his statesman-like image. Adebayo's intellectual and policy orientation remains attractive, but he need not command the same attention. So friends, this is what my observations are at today's MBS conference. And I would like to read your comments. It's highly appreciated. Please, if you have not joined my page, kindly do so. I'm also on YouTube, Facebook. TikTok will only allow me 3 minutes. Please go to my YouTube page and Facebook to see the entire length of the video and watch them properly. All right? So I thank you for watching, and I rest my case. Goodbye.